The time is now to start a journey to find true freedom. Break the chains. Become God's best. This is Freedom Quest with Terry Baxter.
You pay attention to body cues, things that seem familiar but you don't know. I didn't really relate to much of the book, but there was one part in particular I related to. And I took a note. My parents always had an half-empty bottle of cough syrup that was not marked in our room, everywhere. So I can remember maybe eating dinner, but after dinner it goes blank until the following day at school. I have no memories. So the only thing I could figure is her parents had drugged her with some kind of a liquid. My parents probably did the same, so we would remember. But it would explain why one of my biggest fears is surgery. Not the recovery, not the pain. The scariest part for me of surgery is waking up, because I don't like the idea that I can't wake up. When you wake up from surgery, it takes you 20 to 30 minutes to come to fully, and I panic. And my sister does the same thing. She straight panics, and I will never get drunk. I won't ever get under the influence because I will panic like you wouldn't believe, and now I know why. Thoughts? Oh, I don't know if you guys ever saw the movie Frequency. It's with Jim Caviezel and what's his name, Dennis Quaid. He has two sets of memories. That's this whole time travel movie. But that's how I feel. I have two sets of memories. Like, I have my life that I used to remember before 2019. And then I have to go back and look at my life again with this new set of memories. It's really weird to have two timelines in your timeline. It's very strange. Some of my biggest clues that something was wrong were an uneasiness around my parents. Pain medicine, I would avoid ones that would make me out of it. I would tell the doctor, don't give me anything that's gonna get me high. In 2012, I had many trips to the ER for head pain. The cocktail they would give me would make me loopy, and I would begin to talk a lot. And my husband would say, why don't you just relax? I couldn't figure out why I couldn't relax, because all I wanted to do was keep talking to keep myself aware of things. I did not want to get loopy and out of it. I've had probably 7 or 8 surgeries, and it's weird that that's the worst part for me. Another thing that happened with my one daughter in June of 21 is she spaced out, would have vision blurred, a couple other symptoms, and certain music would play. So I had to ask our friend Victor Ramos, what is that about? And he said, music is so prominent in these rituals because music is a powerful weapon to split the mind. They really know how to torture people. And there was this one time, I think Dave can elaborate on this, but there was this one time, one song triggered all 3 of us, if you want to elaborate on that.
So I like to go on YouTube and when it fails. People following people's misfortunes. Not that I take pleasure in that.
Yes, you do.
It's just funny.
You do.
Simpsons, it's funny because it's happening. But so I'm watching this thing, and it's about boating sales. And so they're playing this just weird kind of eerie music box music.
Yeah.
And right away, she just
me.
It's just Janet and me were watching. Oh, she just there's a visible reaction. Or I'm like, oh man, what's going on? She's like, turn it off. I'm like, oh, yep, you betcha. So I turn it off, and it's just like, so let's call the girl, see what it does for that. And without saying anything, and right away, they both walk in and
crying.
They both just went break in tears. And they're not emotional that way. They're, by the grace of God, they're very, the Lord has really kept that. So we're very thankful for His grace as the first year in that. But just a boating fail with weird music box just put them into a state of panic and sheer terror. The 3 of them. And so that took a while for me just to learn how to help them deal with what I was dealing with.
Now, what's interesting is this secrecy behind Freemasonry. It blows my mind, because when I was doing ancestry.com around the same time, I just happened to be doing it, which nothing's a coincidence. I found an obituary from a great-grandmother, and the obituary mentioned she died after she got home from a Pocahontas lodge meeting. She had a heart attack. And I thought, that is such a weird thing to put into an obituary, that you got home.
1:15 in the morning.
1:15 in the morning. So I started retracing. I was able to retrace our ancestry back to the 1600s. And there was so many Freemasonry ties. It's wild. But one in particular, this is probably where it started. One of my relatives was part of the Boston Tea Party. And when they were done with the Boston Tea Party, they must have wanted to just be Indians or identify as Indians because they formed the Improved Order of the Red Men. These white men would take these vows and denounce their whiteness, I don't know what to call it, but they would be forever identified as an Indian from that point on. And one of my relatives was in that order. And that would make sense why my grandmother or great-grandmother was Pocahontas Lodge. They always identify with being Indian. I was always told all my life we're Indian, but we have no Indian ancestry, like not the genetic. So the secrecy, like when I'm finding these things out, and I had been lied to my entire life by all my family members, like that was bizarre. My aunts and uncles, my cousins, I don't think know anything about it. At least I hope not, but that was wild. And then you start studying Freemasonry, you start looking at the oaths that they take, and then you start understanding why they don't talk about it, why they have to keep it secret. When we're done, we'll give you the name of the podcast that we did. I go into a lot more detail, but some of the things that came out of all this that were really good, that as far as the recovery goes, I can sleep with my back to the door. Up until 3 years ago, I could not sleep with my back to the door. It's something that it's like a survivor thing. I get better sleep. I'm much better with my chronic pain and energy, closer to the family, closer to Jesus than I've ever been. Watching my family get closer to Jesus through the healing process, healing by finally talking about it out loud. This has helped start accept the reality of our situation, because I will tell you right now, no survivor wants to be identified as being a survivor. This was not the last thing in the world I thought I'd ever say was I'm a survivor of satanic ritual abuse. That is really weird. God brought many folks into our lives. One being a friend's sister who was suicidal. She started opening up about molestation, because once you start talking about your trauma, the floodgates open and suddenly everybody tells you their story because they finally feel safe enough to do it. I was introduced to a woman who had claimed to have been ritually abused by her father. She was a practicing witch, but she was a good witch. Friend of ours sought help from Dr. Dickinson, and it's interesting how God prepared us to be in the deliverance ministry also. I don't think there's ever been a time, maybe you could correct me if I'm wrong, but has there ever been any time you ever heard of a satanic ritual abuse survivor helping deliver people from demonic oppression? I mean, God sure gets the last laugh on that, doesn't he? So, you want to say anything?
Let me jump in for a moment.
Sure.
I don't know if you understand how rare this is, what you just saw. And we've been working in ministry for 50 years. We've worked with some people who have gone through SRA survivors. The grace of your husband, when this started coming out and discovering how your wife had been wounded and abused and used before as a little girl, there's something very special about you, Dave, and I'll just say this. To work through this, to give her the support, the understanding, both spiritually and emotionally, and the love, this is a beautiful picture. Our observation is, many times when memories start coming back, and sometimes it's a man, because there are little boys that are abused and they can become victimized. It's the exception to the rule that a marriage stays together.
Right.
Just keep that in mind. What you are witnessing here is nothing short of a miracle for this couple. How many years were you married before this started coming out? Where you started?
18.
18 years of marriage. And all of a sudden, the memories start coming back and going through the counseling and the other thing, and validated memories, I dare say that. And to see a couple stick together and work with your wife, and then your family members understanding some other things that happen. This is a very rare testimony that you're hearing here.
Right.
And I dare say, and I hadn't heard your testimony completely up to this point, this is the only case that I have ever encountered of a marriage that stayed together with this kind of love, gentleness, and caring. And Dave, I want to say you're displaying the character of Jesus in just a very beautiful way.
Yeah.
Would you take a moment and maybe share with us as a group how important that was for your husband to first of all believe you. Secondly, to love you, support you, and work you through this.
No. Well, the best thing he could have done was believe me and be there to hug me when I started having a flashback. I never even got the impression he was doubting it. The only time, and he can speak to this, the only time he ever had some weird thing going on in his mind is, you just still can't believe this is our reality. When we got married and I told him none of this. So the fact that he believed me says something. You want to say that?
There was no doubt in my mind that she was telling the truth. The scars showed through it. But seeing them in my girls showed through. And I had just went into law enforcement before I went into the insurance industry. And the reason I didn't is because my wife was basically bedridden from 09 to 15. It was back at the end of 2011. And we had 2 girls, 3 and 0 at that time. So I went to insurance, better hours, all that stuff. But there's still this, I've always been a seeker of justice, which is ironic because growing up until I was 15, I was not a nice choice. And so, when all this starts, you see the scars, and then you see what your oldest daughter is drawing, and at first it's a disconnect, because 18, or actually at that point, 19 years in a relationship with my in-laws. It took me, and then the darkness started. Murderous rage. I'm not proud of this, all right? I'm not proud of this at all. But murderous rage said it. And my in-laws were no longer human. They're no longer her parents. They were targets to be eliminated. And they started methodically planning their assassinations. She had no idea, because I wasn't going to put that on her. And I knew that if I got caught, and it was going to be a big if, because I had things planned down, 2, 3 run cars under the spots that I would go, under the company I would call for the taxi, under all this. And at the same time, depression said, stop. And here I am, I'm working 3 jobs at this point, moving into 2021. I still have the insurance agency going. I'm working full-time as an industrial supply person, and then a part-time worship leader, pastor at the church we were at, that my cousin-in-law was pastor at. And so I have all this going on, and I go to him for about, because his wife, my cousin, was abused by her grandchild. And she had seen Dr. Dickinson as well and gotten healing. So I go to him, and I resolved to Lord my anger towards him. But you heard this first part, and he's like, Dave, no, don't, I can't hear this. Sorry, can't hear this. And I'm like, are you kidding me? Seriously? You're my pastor. How dare you? So I'm working through that with the Lord at that point. And then the business relationship I had with my partner in the insurance industry, he just broke the contract and just cut me off for reasons that he apologized for later, going on, I don't know what he was going on. And so in the meanwhile, we're trying to move out to Las Vegas area for her help, because she felt like she was at her mission in the dry plant. And we have this insurance building in Waterford, Wisconsin, that we needed to sell. And I had all this plan. Keyword, I had all this planned. And then all this comes to light in 19. And then we finally put the building up for sale, January 20. Start getting some traffic. People are like, oh yeah. And then February, we're like, people are interested. They're going for financing. And then COVID. commercial real estate industry screeches to a halt.
Yeah.
You ain't going nowhere. And meanwhile, I'm dealing with this stuff and trying not to put anything more on her plate or on my girls. And I'm seeing what my girls are processing and planning this stuff for my in-laws. But God, the two best words in the Bible. And even during that time, I went into a deep depression. From September of 19 until October of 20. And Megan, as I told you, I'm still saying it whole. Are you shattered today? Because after the Lord took care of the murderous rage that I had, I was about the depression. Meanwhile, my wife and my girls have this amazing time with Jesus, and I'm thanking the Lord for that, but at the same time, I'm not. And I'm not hearing from him. And I'm not doubting if God's there. I know he's there. I'm like, where are you? And I hated nighttime because nighttime meant that I wouldn't be falling asleep. Because I'd be sitting there in the worst state that I have ever been in my life. And then I get the George Bailey sent over. Your word, Lord, that little lie. And start going down that road of how can I off myself? And how can I make it look like an accident? Because I'm still within the 2-year contestability period of the life insurance. Got to make sure it's an accident so that they are well taken care of for the rest of their life. And it took a brother getting my name to Lisa Meister because he listened to our podcast. A brother in the Lord who lives in Idaho. And our girls were at a camp in Iowa. And he was going to that camp to speak the same week that our girls were going to get her. And God and Jesus, I can just picture Jesus like, you think I'm not ministry leaders who are holding about it. And it took him because his wife was experiencing DID and was in SRA and fingerprint. And he could identify with me, I could identify with him. And he said that 2 words in that first phone call that just resonated with me when he said, I had his murderous rage, Dave, and I had no one to go to. I'm like, holy smokes. Good thing we're both in better spots now, otherwise we would have connected and done stuff for free.
Yeah.
And the justice guy in me, I'm just like, it almost feels like I'm getting ripped off by the Lord. And if you look at it from a humanistic standpoint, if you look at it without the eyes of the Lord Jesus, to Jesus, I know how to take care of this people, man, and I know. He's like, Dave, I know he's the right here where he is.
I'm reminded,
We're definitely not his thoughts.
I'm reminded of the story of Joseph.
Yeah.
You know, when his brothers sold him into slavery and he had those 13 years to muse on it, and, you know, then he's second in the land and finally his brothers show up. Can you imagine the desire for vengeance?
Oh.
And the key, and this is what I love when God works, the key is when Joseph finally looked at his brothers and said, you meant it for evil, but God meant it for good.
Right.
And that's where that flooding grace and forgiveness comes in and lives are changed. And I'm going to say this, that I've heard hundreds of heart-wrenching stories over the years. You can't be in ministry for 50 years.
Right.
And minister around the world without having your heart ripped out and leaving fragments of it here and there with people. And the big question is, why would a loving God allow such tragedies and atrocities to take place? And some of the atrocities I've visited include Auschwitz, Birkenau. You know, I've been through all those camps. I've been in places where I go there intentionally just to face how cruel Satan and whatnot can be. But in every one of those dark places, the love of Jesus shows up. And it's like breaking through the darkness.
Right.
You know, Freedom Quest is the theme of what we do. If you look at this banner behind us, and you can also look at the cover of your workbook. And by the way, that's, I believe God's pen name is maybe coincidence, because Amy Elizabeth at the TV station ordered this without realizing what was on the cover of the workbook. I said, I just want something that shows the light breaking through the darkness. Breaking through the darkness. And she got that with the sun, and if you see the cross and the darkness on this side, and it's piercing through. And that's what I believe Jesus does in our ugly world out there. His love, his grace, his work on the cross pierces the darkness. And this is what I see as a picture of your marriage at this period of time. And you know, so many people that we work with, when we start, it can look really ugly and black and dark, and the gospel pierces through, the love of God comes in, and Jesus changes things. Jesus changes things.
Yep.
And what a miracle.
Yeah.
What a miracle this story is. And you two look really good sitting in front of that, by the way, right now. I think you're a great testimony of the way the Lord works.
Can I say something real quick?
Sure.
I didn't say this, but my question got answered when I had been wondering for many months why all the little scars all over. That was driving me nuts. My oldest probably has like 19 or 20 of them on her. I took pictures of them all, because until I could figure it out, I was going to ask some kind of a forensic doctor, because I'm like, what is this? And then I found about 13 or 14 on my youngest. And when I got a hold of Victor Ramos, he said, those are for ceremonies, because you have to remember in rituals, they're mocking Christ, so they're always mocking blood, always. Blood, 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 that's all it is. He said, so let's just say your father wanted to get a contract, or your father wanted something. There's a cut a certain way, say something, he'll get it. So for every cut on them, there was something behind what my father or mother wanted to get out of. So he goes, that's always about power, money, bloodthirst, you name it. So I finally got my question answered. But he goes, if there's small cuts, and, you know, because I thought to myself, I'm a bad mom. How could I not see my kids coming back with all these cuts? Well, it only happened one at a time. And if it's this long, you're never going to say, oh, my parents must have done something. That's just too horrific. And we did have another military person that we were friends with look at all the cuts. And he knows a lot about that stuff. And he said those were intentional, made with a certain type of knife. It wasn't like, you can tell it wasn't someone who fell down, someone who cut themselves on something. That's very intentional knife cut. That's surgical.
The scalpel.
Oh yeah, he said it was a scalpel. So.
And I just praise God for the doctrine of forgiveness.
Yes.
The power of healing. You know, not only the name that God revealed himself, Jehovah Rapha in the Old Testament, I'm the God that healeth thee, but Jesus is a great physician. And sometimes we think only in terms of physical healing.
Yep.
And I've seen God do physical healing. But the healing of the inner brokenness, of stories of lives who have been broken by Satan, and Jesus healing and putting them back together.
Yep.
We've seen marriages put back together that apart from a miracle would have never happened.
Right.
And that's a good side of what we're talking about.
Right.
I don't like looking at the darkness and the ugly side. I like looking at the light and what Jesus does to enter into that and change it.
Yep.
Would you mind if we take a few questions?
Sure.
You probably heard some pretty extreme stuff here. Any questions out there?
And just, I'm sorry if you guys already mentioned it, but remember some like the cuts. How was memories? That was the time.
Yeah, Dr. Dickinson answered that for me. So I think I explained it before, but what he said was when something traumatic happens.
Can you repeat?
Oh,
Repeat
the question was basically, with all the cuts and things, how could you not remember? Because that was my question too. Believe me, I was there a million times. And it has to do with dissociation. So when your body goes through a trauma, there's a certain protection mechanism called dissociative identity disorder. It's not a disorder until you become an adult and you're not functioning well, but it's a protection mechanism that God put in our minds so we would not crumble from the trauma. But what happened was Dr. Dickinson said the memory goes in, it's never lost, but there's an area of the brain where it goes into a recall, so things you can recall, but he goes, there's also an amnesic state, and he describes all the biological terms for the brain, but he said, that's why you can't remember. He goes, it's there. It'll come as God wants it to. And then eventually, after he explained that to me, I started recovering just a few, because I pray every night, Lord, do not let me remember this. I do not need to know what happened. I have very few memories. In fact, when I did the podcast interview with my friend Lisa, she's interviewed thousands of SRA victims, and she said, my story is very unique because what happens in most cases is victims will start having memory flashbacks first. Then they find scars. I had scars, and I had no memory to match it with. And then I had my daughter having memories first. That was a very strange reality for me to get used to. And then I finally had flashbacks, and we put pieces together.
Any other question? They're going to be around here tonight, and I think into tomorrow also. Mm-hmm. And we're also doing one more session. And let me just give you a hint as to what the next session this afternoon is. Originally, we had them scheduled only for 2 sessions. And then I got a cancellation 2 nights ago from another couple. We're going to do a session on spiritual warfare and mental illness. A husband and wife team, they both have their doctorate degree. They're doctorate level professors at St. Cloud State University, teaching doctorate psychologists about Jesus and how only Jesus can set people free from some conditions. Mm-hmm. And they're on their way. They're going to be the next ones on our docket here. And I got a phone call, and the wife came down with COVID. Right. She was rushed into the emergency room, falling apart. The husband was getting symptoms. He said, I hope you forgive me. We're not able to come. But I thought it would be really neat to do one more session this afternoon on this subject and take it to the next step. And I'm just going to introduce it a little bit here. Then we'll take a little break and we'll come back. And that is, so how do you help people through this? What do you do? And I'm going to be paying as much attention during that session as all of you, because I have not been equipped to help people through the recovery of SRA. It takes a little training, it takes some skill. I praise God there are some great Christian counselors out there that are equipped with it. Years ago in Sioux City, it was Dr. Dan Rumberger, who worked with the International Center for Biblical Counseling and others. But there are some very practical things I think that any of us can do when our antenna starts picking up. There's some strange things here.
Yeah.
You know, what are we dealing with? So let's take a little bit of a break here, and then we'll come back, and we'll just jump into that. Okay. And I think that Dave might have some input on that for us, and I'm sure you've got some things to throw into it as well. And I'm going to be listening and learning with the rest of you. You say, Terry, you're the instructor of Freedom Quest. You do a spiritual warfare. I understand that. Mine is more the basic biblical overall doctrinal point, but getting into some of these areas, I have not been equipped in myself, so I'm learning with you. But one of the things we want to do is provide many of you as alumni ongoing information and point you in directions where you can go on, build your toolbox a little better as well. So let's take a quick break.
Terry Baxter is co-founder of Go Serve Global and Freedom Quest Deliverance Training. To book Terry for a Freedom Quest training for your church or ministry, or for more information on Freedom Quest and to order your study resources, connect with Terry at office@goserveglobal.org.